I am now recording. Thank you very much. Um, I should always, you guys always got to keep on top of me. So you guys all owe Natalia a Starbucks card now for reminding me to record. Anyway, capital is generally referred to as the big one-time expenditures that only happen once but get you some long-term benefit. Now, often capital expenditures miss the day-to-day, everyday, ongoing costs associated with the capital. So that's something that your planners need to look at. But this is looking at capital from the point of view of equity. And that's an important word to know what it means. And if you read this one, they define it for you of how they use it. Because equity is, again, one of those terms that, depending on who's hearing it, it means a different thing. And so you need to know what it means with respect to this plan so that you can go, oh, yeah, it makes sense, or it doesn't make sense. You'll find that people that define the term when they do their writing so that you know what you're talking about, all of a sudden it's very hard to disagree with what they're talking about because they've got actual data that's framed around the use of the word in that way. Then you get to decide whether the use of that word in that way is meaningful to your end goals or not. Okay. So, but this is another cool one. Land use laws and how it affects the built environment. So there's another thing. What is the built environment? We think we know. We have an idea. And this idea of public-private spending. We think often that there's public spending and there's private spending. But you'll find out that there is a ton of public-private spending. And that gets into a lot of the difficulties that we look at, and many people think, well, that's a conflict of interest, that's a this, that's a that. Well, it could be, it often is, if you really look at that kind of stuff. But when there's a agreement between public and private for spending, those can go south really quickly, like that big Foxconn plant in Wisconsin. What a joke of a fiasco that thing is. That was a public-private enterprise that happened. But there's tons of great public-private enterprises. Most of the ones that you think about are things like sports stadiums, which have a great public benefit and bring lots of money into the public coffers and bring money into the private coffers. So there's all sorts of things about this that are really, really interesting. So if you just take a look at this before our next guest comes, it'll be a lot easier for you to understand what he's talking about and to ask questions. So that's read that over quickly, and then here was the webinar, the results of the webinar. I haven't had anybody from this class ask me for a practice session for the skills demo. So I'm just going to assume that you guys all know. I know assume means ask of you and me, but I'm going to do it. You're just going to have to know how to do this. Okay. The sign up thing is there. Maybe you can get another sign up in. But our first skill demo is now like 2 weeks away. It's in weeks 8 and 9, which is coming up really fast. We're in week 6, I think. And you're just going to have to get on and do it for me. And so, and you have to pass the class, right? That's in the grading. So if you're struggling with how to do it and how to show me, that's a problem. But again, up to you. If you already know how to do it, that's cool. Here's how to split your screen and all that kind of stuff. We have an Autodesk design challenge for those of you who are in the mechanical area. I'm not sure how many of you are toward the mechanical side, but this is a mechanical design project. It lasts for 9 weeks. It's really 7 weeks, and the last 2 weeks are just like show your stuff and do things. There's a bunch of phases to it, so you can hop in and out of each phase. You don't have to do all 4 phases of it. Each phase is either 2 or 3 weeks long. You can pop in and out. We're having a kickoff meeting on it, and it's going to use Autodesk Fusion, which is really, really a cool program. And you really don't even have to know how to use it. We have some helpers to be able to do it. And there's a flyer, and of course it's not showing up. So it looks very cool. There it is. It's all cool and groovy. Okay, so there's our announcements. So let's get into it. We're going to talk briefly about what land planning submittal packets are and what they're for. We're going to talk briefly about what the land planning submittal packet is going to entail. It's going to be about a place. Is it 4632 or 4832? Hold on a sec. It's 4832, I think. So I'm going to have to go fix that. I'm pretty sure it's 4832. We'll check on that as we look and see. If we look at the parcel assessor's parcel viewer map, it's 4632. I got it right. 4632. Okay, and you'll recognize that as the one that we've looked at already. Okay, and we have a project description. So now you know what it's about, and you can make your initial land planning submittal to the local area planning group. And that's going to be a project cover sheet, which you should know how to do, but I'll give you an example. Land use calculation sheet. We've sort of done that, right? It's an R2. It can get this. It can get that. It can have this size pipe. You'll do that whole thing for it. But you're going to do it for the as-built and for what it would take to change it. An existing sheet, and these sheets are actually just views, demolition, construction. So these are all things that you've made now already, and you're just going to do them very quickly on the new one. So those of you who just sort of used what I had and traced it, this may be a little shock for you. I'm not giving you anything this time. You just have to do it. And you've got some information. There it is. Okay? There's your information right there. So that's what you're going to be on. You'll be ready to go from there. There is going to be a fair housing statement letter after you look and see what some of these things are. I'll give you a little template for it. But this is a hard one to do sometimes. And the Title 24 Cal Green statement letter can be a little bit hard sometimes. And then you want a survey addendum, which I'll show you about. So I'm not going to show you everything today. Some of it will be on Tuesday of next week, and some of it will be on Thursday. And some of it I'm just going to make a video for you. All right? So when is all this due? I think when we look at the calendar, there's a submittal that's a check print on the 4th. And let's see if I have the real one on here yet. I don't have it up yet, but this is the 11th is when it's actually factually due. Okay, so that's how that'll go. Okay, any questions on that? All right. So there we go. All right, then let's go ahead and take a look at what the land planning documents all consist of, okay? So first let's do some, let's go over some terminology. A land planning packet is a group of documents that you're going to give to somebody, okay? And you're doing it so that you can get approval. There, that's simple. It consists of, there's no Dropbox. Oh, yeah, I have to turn that one on. I think there's a Dropbox. Hold on a sec. Yeah, there it is right there. Land submittal plan. So Benjamin said there's no Dropbox for the review. It will just go right in here, right? Just like you always do. Oh, yeah, it's like, but you know what to put in there. It just says you put your stuff in there. Oh, it says submitting nothing. Oh, that's interesting. Gotcha. Wonder why that says that. There we go. I'll make it file upload. I'll just make it so you can put anything in there. How's that? Thank you. Got it. So now let's just go back. 1, 2, 2, and 3. Okay, good catch. Everybody owes Benjamin for that one too. Okay, so you're gonna whatever you need. That's your packet. Okay, so you get with the Planning Commission, you see what type of stuff that particular one is, but I'm giving you a template for it. Okay, so land use planning is essentially just that. You're regulating the use of land. And we talked about this. Why are you regulating it? Desirable social and environmental outcomes. So we say it's for social and environmental outcomes, as well as efficient use of resources. So these are all things that are supposed to be taken into account. And that's not just me saying it. That's, oh, dang. They moved my site. Okay, that's Wikipedia, though, basically. So land use planning is supposed to take care of social, environmental, and resources. And resources, they're really meaning economic resources. Okay, local governments primarily regulate land use. Local governments are the ones that regulate it. Now, there are overriding factors that get put into play by county, state, federal, things like that, okay? And most state legislators have allocated land use authority to municipalities or counties, okay? And they're called home rule provisions or state zoning and enabling acts. So even though the local government is the one that does the work and gets it done, and they have that local authority, that authority is granted by a larger entity. So people go, oh, well, our local people get to do everything. Well, no, you don't. Actually, your local control is ceded to you by state legislatures, and they have the responsibility and authority and the right to tell a local authority that they are not working in the benefit of the state, or that they are working for the benefit of the state. So be very, very clear on that. You'll hear lots of people, the local people. Well, you know what? That's actually not true. The local people have been ceded that authority for years and years and years, but it's actually given to you by the state legislature. And then, so the state looks at overriding regulations over what the local municipalities and counties are allowed to do through home rule provisions and enabling acts. That doesn't sound very good because enabling sort of goes with your letting somebody do something bad, but it's not. It's good to enable good acts like everything else. So, of course, there's the Fair Housing Act, which we're looking at, but that's only one of the larger acts that are in place. The Fair Housing Act is for desirable social outcomes. Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, state building codes are all environmental outcomes. And when we say environmental, we talk about environmental in the large sense, like climate, use of natural resources and things like that. But your environment is also your built environment, which is what Doug Adams is going to talk about a little bit. So state building codes, state health and safety codes, and then there's this thing called eminent domain, which says the state has the ultimate right to abscond with the property, just to take it. And there's rules that say they're supposed to give fair compensation, this, that, and the other thing. But your private rights are overruled when there's a greater good to the state. And that is just basic in our state's constitution. Now, eminent domain might be an interesting place for somebody to do some research. I don't know that much about it. I could maybe get somebody to talk about it. One of my long-term childhood friends and colleagues from college has worked in this area for Caltrans for years and years and years, and actually knows the ins and outs of eminent domain. So if somebody's interested, I can maybe get him to come and talk, Mark Robinson. So these are things that supersede local authority. And so you have to know about those things. Okay? But once you've gotten past that, there's this thing called rights of ownership. And those are bestowed on the holder of real estate property. And it's through what's called title. And it's real interesting what those rights are. It's possession. It means it really is yours. You possess that. But it's through title. And title is one of the most interesting ways that emerging states have done land grabs. So if you look at some of the history, like around the Central Valley and Southern California and even up north, how after California was ceded to the United States and we became a state ourselves, the land titles which were given to the original owners, the intermediate owners through Mexico and Spain were invalidated unless you did certain things, and the timing of those things made it essentially impossible to get done. So those titles that were given at that point were invalidated by the state, and new land titles were given. So possession still evolves through the state, through something called title. And so you're given possession, you're given control. There are certain amounts of control that you have over that property. You can control lots of things about that property, but there are some things that are overriding even your control that have to do with these. You have the right of exclusion, which is really interesting. That says that you can let somebody on your property or not let somebody on your property if it's private. what you do as an enjoyment on that. You get to enjoy the use of that property as you see fit, so long as it's not violating some basic rights and codes. And disposition, it means you get to sell it to whoever you want, so long as it's not violating certain rights and certain codes. So it's never you get to no matter what. There's always a responsibility that goes with the authority. And the understanding of that responsibility and authority is pretty difficult. And it's much more complex than you might think, particularly when it comes to water and mineral rights and air rights above and neighboring rights and things like that. So these are all tempered. This doesn't say you can do whatever you want, whenever you want, however you want. It says within basic rules, you can do whatever you want. Okay? So rights of ownership are pretty cool. And that is what creates wealth. Just so you know. Nobody got wealthy off of a property by renting it. Okay? So it just doesn't work that way. Rights of ownership is the right to amass wealth. So you should know that. And I'm just saying that. You're welcome to go and investigate that. I am not backing that up with a whole bunch of other stuff like I am with these. Okay? But it's well established. And if you want to write an opposing statement that the right of property ownership has nothing to do with wealth, you can do so, and we'll see how that looks. I think you'll have a hard time. So now, with rights of ownership, you must follow covenants, conditions, and restrictions that are written into the title. And you can even write your own. And these are rules of the neighborhood. And often, Yellowstone. Oh, so Laura is talking about a pretty interesting show, private ownership and eminent domain in Yellowstone. Well, that's an interesting one because that was a huge, huge, huge area, right? Yellowstone really did do that. So CC&Rs are rules of the neighborhood. And if any of you have been in an HOA, you know that neighborhoods are just that. And there's lots of rules. And sometimes they seem like, really? Like I lived in an HOA where we had to paint our house a certain color and we had to have a certain kind of a door. And we couldn't even put up lights, Christmas lights, Halloween lights, these lights, those lights on the outside. Of course, on the inside, you're allowed to do whatever you want because you have rights of ownership and blah, blah, blah. So HOAs are interesting. Many times HOAs rules violate these, and there are court cases then. All pretty interesting. So they describe what you can do with your property. And as we heard, some of those, covenants, conditions, and racism is what we saw, and we still do see, by the way. Yes, CC&Rs can restrict what you do in your backyard, depending on the property agreement of that backyard. So in the one that I lived in, they were condominiums, and the HOA owned the property and the external fascia and framing work of the buildings, which was pretty cool because if anything went wrong, the HOA had to pay for it. Okay? Well, you're talking about private freedom, Renolfo. What do you mean? Tell me what that means. Those are interesting words. What does it mean? Private freedom. You tell me what that means. I just talked about having to define what you do. Yeah, no chickens. That's one of the things you can and can't do in certain areas. You want to do with your house because you own it. Okay, I want to put a meth lab in my house. How about that, Renolfo? I own my house. I can do that, right? That's the extension of what you just said. Can I put a meth lab in my house? I own it. And I'm saying own it with capital OWN. Can I put a meth lab in my house? Yeah, Benjamin's answering. Not my house, not my problem. Actually, Renolfo, we belong to a society, and it is. It is your problem. There are basic rules that we belong to as a society. And that's one of the things we're trying to teach here. There are basic things that you can do and you can't do. And we belong to a society. And that's the role of land planning. Now, there are certain things, there's good arguments about what you can and can't do in a house. And there's a lot of rules about that protect what you can do in your house. But if your damn chickens are waking me up every morning at 4 o'clock and I've got to go to work at 6 or 7 and I want my sleep, why do I have to listen to your dang chickens? It's not my house, but it is my problem, isn't it? So yes, in a society, what people do and the basic rules of engagement are, yeah, okay, so Natalia has some good stories. So do I. I actually live right now next to a house that was a meth lab, and it was a problem, and it was a bummer. So, so yeah, and Natalia has some stories too as law enforcement chaplain. So these are all important things, and so what we're trying to teach you is to look deeply, and not everything is. Let's look at a really important land planning one, and I'm not going to say yes, no, or maybe. How many of you have read Prop 15? Yep. Yeah, homelessness is a big thing, and NIMBY, not in my backyard, is a really important discussion. So I'm going to give you an example. I owned a judo club, and I rented a facility. It was right next to the railroad tracks in Davis, and it was in the bad part of Davis on Olive Drive. And I'd leave at about 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and then my buds would move in to the parking lot and the dumpster and things like that. They were the homeless folks, and um, in the morning when I'd get there, I'd open up because I had a shower facility and I had public waste facilities and things like that, and they'd clean up, and I'd ask them to please move off the site by 10 o'clock when I had kids coming, and it was cool, and they were good. And I regularly got phone calls from those guys about people trying to break into my place and doing things to my place. So when you talk about homeless, a lot of times we have preconceived ideas without looking deeply. I would prefer that they had a regular place to sleep, right? Um, and so when we talk about things, we have to look at what are the systemic causes and whether our land planning policies do help create the systemic causes. And that's what we're talking about with some of this stuff that we're going over. And it's tough stuff. It's tough. What we're saying is you need to look deeply and deeply and deeply. Yeah, and it is a problem, right? When people don't have a place to go, um, it's really, really, really a problem. And we had bathrooms that were trashed and all sorts of stuff. But those are all things that you need to deal with from a land planning point of view. Now, as the individual designers, we don't have to worry about that. Okay, we're going to worry about our own thing. But when you talk to planning commissions and say, what about, those are all important considerations. And that's why your land planning, a lot of times these people don't have a place to go because they got gentrified. They got built out. They've been living there just fine in a facility that suited their needs. And all of a sudden they're land planned and out. they're, they're bulldozed. Their area is no longer there. And they don't have a resource to go anywhere else. If you look at the history in the 1600s of, or they simply can't afford the rent. So now let's talk about Prop 15. I urge you all to read it closely. I actually don't know about that one yet. In my own mind, it's such a hard choice for me. So Prop 15 is about, taxation on land. It's an extension of a repeal of a portion of Prop 13, which said that property taxes couldn't go up based on the value of your place until you resold it. And so there's many large commercial operations that haven't been and major renovations didn't count. So this is why you see so much land planning stuff to the commissions. You go, how is that a renovation? They just rebuilt that whole thing from the foundation up. Well, it was considered a renovation, and they kept right barely within what renovation means, so they didn't have to increase their property taxes, even though they're doing a ton of work. So there are places that are paying property taxes based on land values in the 1980s, which were pretty low compared to now. So our tax base is what provides services, roads, police, all these, education, certain amounts of health care, services for people who don't have money. And so there's a ballot measure, Prop 15, that says, well, you know what? That's all well and good, but there's some big dogs out there that own a lot of property, and they're still paying almost nothing. And their property values haven't increased exponentially. And if they were to sell that, they would make so much money, and they're getting tons of money, but they're not paying their fair share toward the public services that go to support their area. That's the argument. And it seems pretty reasonable. You would think that Disneyland might be, billions and billions and billions of profit come in from Disneyland since 1980, and they pay almost no property taxes. Lots of places are like this. However, we also know that if all of a sudden the tax base increases, what's going to happen to the people that are renting in those facilities, the businesses? Those businesses are going to get hammered because you can bet the property owners aren't going to go, well, I'll keep my rents the same. I'll just pay more property taxes. You know that that's not going to be what happens. So that's why I'm on the fence on Prop 15. I go, yeah, it seems right that they should be paying their fair share towards our social, economic group and well-being. They're part of the state. They're part of everything that we do. They've got roads. They've got sewers. They've got electricity. They've got utilities. They've got all this kind of stuff. And the cost of all those has increased tremendously, and they're not paying more. But by the same token, what happens when you hit that all at once with an increase? It's like, oh man, I hate to think what's going to happen to those businesses, being a former commercial site renter myself, knowing what that's like. Well, so Laura says, shouldn't there be separate rules for 100-pound gorillas? And they're trying to say that this is that way. So they're saying, well, yeah, if your property is worth less than $3 million, you'll be void and all this kind of stuff. It also says that it doesn't apply to residential. Now, I'm trying to read in there whether a large apartment complex who operates under a commercial business license is considered commercial. I haven't seen that because I'll look in Davis and I see, probably 40% of all people that live in Davis live in a large residential complex that is listed as a business. So is that commercial? I don't know what they mean by commercial. But when you start poking at one person or another, it sort of goes against our idea of fairness. So, why should Disney, just because they're very... So I see how I play both sides of the fence all the time, you guys? That's my job. My job is to create excellent thought and critical thinking dialogue. So you got a 100-pound gorilla like Disney or Apple or Google or anybody, or some of these big banks or these big landowners that have the big, the big buildings in downtown Los Angeles, Sacramento, San Francisco. How do you focus on just them? How is that right? That's a little bit of a problem. Then it's like, well, why should they say, well, wait, I'll give you an example that always caught me, and this was a social one, is Davis has an ordinance that goes along with fair housing, all these types of ordinances and the ADA and stuff like that says if you own a business, you're not allowed to discriminate based on race, sex, sexual orientation, land of origin, anything like that. And then there's the statement, unless you employ less than 5 people. And I always look at that, wait. So it's okay to discriminate if it's 4 people? How did that number come up? 4 people is okay, but 5 isn't? Well, let's say 4 is not okay. Then what about 3? And so when you look at these things and you take them to their logical extreme, you always have to keep that in mind. That's one of the ways that you look at an argument and see if it makes sense. Now, not everything can be that way, and sometimes you go, yeah, but it's the only thing we can do. You might come to the conclusion where you go, yeah, I disagree with it, but it's the only thing I can do. Or we have to do something. Or. And that's why it's so cool to have these discussions like this, because it's really hard. It's really, really hard. So these CC&Rs, man, okay, we're to there. Isn't this a cool? I mean, I tell you, this is my favorite part of this one because I know how to draw already, but I don't know how to do all this. So zoning, once you've got rights of ownership, we restrict your rights of ownership, and Renolfo, keep an eye on this. We restrict what you can do. It's your land, you own it, but we zone it. Okay? So now we're not even talking about criminal stuff. We're just talking about zoning. You own it, but we zone it. You can put 1 house on this. You can put 2. You can put 10. You can raise chickens. You can't raise chickens. You can put in a business. You can't put in a business. You can put in a granny flat. You can't put in a granny flat. Zoning are local laws or regulations. They're local. Okay, we have the authority to locally do this. How real property can and cannot be used in certain geographic areas. So when you say, I own it, I can do whatever you want, no, you can't. Right there. Period. So now we get to start talking about How much can we tell you you can do, and what can't we tell you you can do? And zoning is one of the ways that we do that. And you should know, zoning has a thing called variance, which means that at any time the planning agency can give a variance to it or can change it. It just takes a vote. And certain localities have different rules for doing that they've put into place. And so these zones are for planning purposes, but they can be modified. It's called a variance. But you'll see that usually they talk about serve to help the community advance economically. That's how most places do it, economically. So the planning commission are the ones that take care of zoning and make sure that these health things are met and all that kind of stuff. And they do that by offering building permits. Okay, so you have to, would zoning be the most important factor overall? No, it's one of the factors. It's one of the factors, but zoning is just an easy way of getting characteristics set. So it's just one of the things. There are also lots and lots and lots of rules and regulations. As an example, I used last week that I owned a preschool, and there was a place that was trying to put a tobacco shop within a certain distance of it, and that's illegal by the social services laws. You can't have tobacco or liquor shops within a certain distance of a preschool. And you can look at that and look at, usually rules and regulations are made because somebody did something that was like, what in the world were they thinking? Why did they do that? Nobody would do that. Somebody goes and does it, so we make a law about it. That's how most laws get put into place. Somebody does an egregiously horrific action that nobody would have ever thought anybody would do, and so they got to make a law about it. That gets very, very hard. So zoning, most important factor, I'm not sure that we would say it that way, Renolfo, but it's the first thing that you look at. It is definitely the first thing that you look at to see if your project is appropriate or not. And then if it doesn't fall within it, then you get to do your homework to show why it should be okay to do what you're doing. So maybe I would say yes. It's the most important because it's certainly the first that we look at. Okay, so once you've got a building permit that says you can go ahead and start building, the building permit does lots of things. It sets out who's going to inspect, when they're going to inspect, how they're going to inspect. But once the permit is done, usually there's a bank involved that's going to set up their release, their payment release. Okay, now many of us are familiar with smaller jobs or even purchasing a house where it says, boom, there you go. But you can imagine that a bank that's financing a small development or something doesn't want to just shell out 3 or 4 or 5 million right off the bat, and then something goes wrong and it doesn't work. They're going to say, okay, that's cool. Here's your money to get the grubbing and grading done. Okay, those are done. They're inspected. You got the permit for the next part. Here's your money to get the trenching, the foundation, and the stormwater pollution stuff done. Okay, that's all done. Got it all inspected. So the banks are a big deal, and the phases of a project are sort of a coordination of the project payments and the building permits. Because people can't just wait for years and years and years to pay the workers that did a job. Okay, so the progress payments are usually set up so they release some money ahead of time on the estimate of what's going to get done. Once it's done and everybody's paid out and everybody looks good, the bank will release the next part. Okay. All right. And so now that's a lot. There's a lot there. Okay. So Laura said it seems like a logical way to keep everything moving and done properly. It is. And it's a systematic way. And it works very well until you run into an idiot inspector. That's the thing that everybody hates, man. It's like, oh, I've got the inspector that doesn't know what he's doing. And then life is awful. But that's why you hire a contractor that's done it before and has worked with that group, because they know specific planners and inspectors, and they have a way of getting things done, and the inspectors actually know. They go, oh, I've inspected that guy 100 times. Every time it's been right. I just need 10 minutes to go out there and just look at it really quick and be done. So it does work that way, and it's good. Always get a contractor, if you can, that has a good track record with your planning department. It really works. And if you're the contractor, get a good arrangement, a good a reputation with them. Okay, now here's what for our purposes. Okay, so land planning submittal packets are whatever. So if money isn't an issue and you don't have to deal with banks, then often the permitting process is really just by the safety rules. So there are state building codes, and you do have to get inspected to the state building codes, but it's much more simple sometimes than going through. The planning department is still going to do that, right? But it makes it much, much, much easier if there is no bank involved, or it's a small job, right? But I'll tell you, if there's no bank involved and it's a big job, you sort of wonder where that money is coming from, and you can kind of get some queasiness about it. It goes, these checks and balances are important, and the system works, and it's one of the reasons why, by and large, we do have well-built properties. So that's a good thing. So land planning submittal packet is whatever information it takes to get the job done. There. That's what a land planning submittal. But since this is a class and we have to have something to kind of go by, and we can hit some things that are pretty basic and are usually done, we're going to call it the set of documents commonly required by a planning commission for a fairly simple, straightforward, and small project, but one that still takes something. It's not, oh, I'm going to put up a new sign, or I'm going to put up a gazebo, or I'm going to put up, okay? So we've got one that'll be a little bit more interesting than that. Okay? So now I'm going to, so these are, you guys are asking great questions. And I hope that you'll be asking these types of questions to Doug Adams when he comes to come in, right? I mean, nobody's got all the answers, and he's a big high-level planner that looks at how do we develop tools to do some of these things, like the social part, because by and large, we don't have good tools to measure anything with. We're floundering. We're flopping around. We got little dots with maps that show correlations, and we have a pretty good roadmap that says that there's a problem, but we don't have real tools we don't have a parcel viewer's map that shows social things. We don't. We have GIS for all sorts of stuff, but that's not really there. So his focus is, well, how can we develop something like that? Is it possible? Can it be done? And then once it can be done and it is possible, there'll be a whole new discussion about what will it actually be. And those are great. Those are I'm glad I live in a place where we can have some discussions about that. Okay, so here's your assignment. And we're going to go over this in a few minutes in lab in a little bit more depth. Okay? But you've got 10 things to turn in. And they're due not this week, but you should turn in some of it this week, but the following weekend. Okay? There's a cover letter. That should take you 10 minutes. Project cover sheet, maybe an hour. Land use calculation sheet is like what we did before. It's what you've done already, so I don't even have an example for you. If you need one, I'll give you one. Existing sheet, demo sheet, a new construction sheet, stormwater pollution plan sheet, all that kind of stuff. And here's the new one. And I'm going to have to give you a template to this. Let's see. Yeah, that's a project cover sheet right there. That's what a cover sheet to a submittal doc would look like. So Laura says, I don't think the project sheet is illustrating the cover sheet. Yes, it is. So there's an area map, a vicinity map, or a county map, a vicinity map, area map, and a vicinity map. What's local to it. And then you have the actual parcel map. Okay, so Benjamin, I'll be going over that he asked, what should I attack first? I just go right down the list. Bing, 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 bing. I would go right down the list. Okay, because a cover sheet, look, you can make a picture of the county, and you can make a picture of the area that it's in, Arden Arcade, and you can make a picture of the close in on the vicinity of what it is, and you can make this. You know how to make all those, and you have all that kind of stuff. So I would just start marching through this. Project. So here's, and I would leave these ones till the end. I'd leave 8, 9, and 10 till the end because we'll go over those next week. But you've already done a stormwater pollution plan. You've already done what new construction looks like. You just have to do it on this new site. Now look what it says. What is the project? Subdivide the parcel to be like the one next door. Oh, okay. Let's see what's next door. Here's the parcel. What's next door to the east? 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, if they could do it, why can't I? And doesn't that area right there look about like the area that I've got? And if I were to back those up onto this and put a little street right down here, wouldn't it kind of be similar to that? So I think that you would have a good little submittal that you could put forward for this lot to be able to do that. Because look, they've already done it. You can just say, look right next door. That used to be this big. Used to be this thing. That was what was next door. I think this was not part of it. It was this. That was next door. But if they were able to get theirs changed, why can't I get mine changed? Okay? And why would you want to get it changed? Because you want to do something that's sort of good. Okay? Now you want to make money. You definitely want to make money. But you want to do the social side too. And so 4 units is kind of nice because you could put 2 of them below the median. And what would the other 2 then be? If 2 of them are going to be at 75% of the median, what are my other 2 going to be priced at? Well, I want to make at least the median, so they're going to be at 125 or more, right? But I'm going to have 2 of them. Now, how I get to that, I'm not really sure yet. But that's up for my architect to do. I'm just trying to get this little land planning thing done that subdivides. Now, what's the other social benefit? Tell me, what's the social benefit of having 4 lots instead of 1? What benefit is that to the city or the county or the community or the neighborhood? Yep, I can provide housing. That's a good thing. And some of it, it's got kind of a spread of maybe economic capability. Yeah, Natalia, why do you say Natalia says more tax money? Why do you say that? It's correct. It's absolutely correct. There's more tax money. List some of the ways, because there's more than just one way. Do you know some of the other ways that you get that? Yeah, each pays separately. But so, first of all, each one is going to have a value, and the value of 4 homes is going to be higher than the value of this, right? And regardless of whether um, of of the value of those houses or whatever, regardless of how Prop 15 plays out, they're going to get reassessed, and you're going to have 4 houses reassessed at a much higher value than this one. And I know the owner, and he did get assessed in, I think, 2015. I think was when this was done. So he's got it assessed at a fairly high value, but 4 lots are way more expensive. And then what about for the schools? Building lots out provides jobs. That's another good one. What about for schools? How are schools funded? They're funded on property taxes, and we all know that doesn't really cover what they need. What else is there? There is a segment of property taxes called parcel tax that can be local, that go to your local school. And it can't be a poll tax. It can't be a per person. And I don't know why I'm blanking on the name of it now. Somebody give it to me. Yeah, each residence pays into the system. That's true. You do have, hopefully, much more income in this area paying your local portion of income tax. The income for 4 residential groups is going to be more than the 1 or 2 that you can put on here. Oh, it's Mello-Roos. Mello-Roos taxes were the way that local school districts got around the old Prop 13, but it has to be on a per parcel basis. So this will provide 4 times the funding to the local school district as this. And I think that you got to say is a good thing. So these are things when I talk about down here, your fair housing statement letter, you're gonna bring some of these thoughts up as to why this is a good thing socially. And of course you're gonna say, and our deeds are gonna be non-restrictive, right? You're not gonna be able to say, and I'm only going to allow certain people to live on this site. You're just not allowed to do that, and it's wrong to do that. you could show that, well, this will be a bummer because right now the RD2 can have chickens, and you're going to have this now as either an RD1 or an RD2, but the size restriction on it, if you go into the chart, will say no chickens. Or I think it says you can have 2 chickens but no roosters or something like that. There's stuff. But in your fair housing statement letter, you're going to bring up some of these things that we just talked about. It says, hey, and this is a good idea. There's some other good ideas about this. Okay? If you look this up on Google and you do what's nearby, what would you want to show? How close you are? Are you within walking or very, very short transportation to all basic necessities, which includes education, food, transportation, healthcare? And for those of you who know this area, and religious services, that's also considered a basic need. Okay, so if you look on, and you can take screenshots from Google, you're not really within walking distance, but not too bad because there's really no walking along Winding Way. But you're a short distance. You're within a 2-minute drive. So, of buses, there's like 6 large grocery outlets within 10 minutes. There is a hospital, I think, an emergency. I think there's 2 of them within 15 minutes. There's a number of religious houses. Well, there's one right next door. I don't know the denomination. There's another one right up here that I don't know the denomination. But there's lots of. So this is a prime place to have people go. Okay, and so if you talk about access to education, right? There's access to great education once it's opened. Once it's opened. Anyway, so these are some of the things that you'll talk. Yeah, Gur. Yeah, you're not kidding, Gur. But that's a whole nother cool class we could have. All right, does that help answer sort of? And here's your cover letter. I gave you something that you can just cut and paste into. So you can start with this, and this lets you think about it really well. Now, this thing has a lot more detail than you're really going to need. This was a different one. You're just going to chop this thing into 4 pieces and show a right-of-way. Sort of like what you did in the drawings we've already done, where you just had a plot plan and you did some like basic overlays on it. Okay, so stormwater pollution plan, existing, demolition. There are oak trees on it, which I am told are not a protected species. If any of you horticulture people want to go and just walk by and verify that, you can probably verify it from the street, but if you need to get onto the property, I'll get Professor Welch to give you the authorization to go onto the property to check it out. And if they are protected, then that's got to be part of your stormwater pollution prevention plan, is protect that vegetation and do offsets to either move it or replant for it. Okay, so I'm a little bit over time on lecture. Do you guys, oh, cool. So Natalia says they have to have a tag on them to be protected. How do you know that somebody hasn't cut the tag off? I'm just asking. So who does the tagging? Is there like the Art and Arcade tree people or the city? Okay. And if it's in the county, do you know? Is they probably, okay, they aren't, yeah. But there's got to be a group. There's got to be a group that's identified. And if somebody could find it, that would be cool. Anybody know, is there a GIS database once it's in there? Because I tell you, I worked on a product that had to get tagged out in the field for testing, and the tags were copper. And for the little copper tag, people would cut those tags off and go sell them, put them into their recycling stuff. And it's amazing what people do for a little piece of metal. Maybe they're plastic now. They don't care. That was a long time ago. Anyway, any quick questions before I turn this recording off? Take a quick break. Okay. Yeah. All right. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and close up.